Welcome to RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network with your hostess, Jen Josie. Join like-minded real estate investors and accelerate your business towards greatness. You will hear step-by-step strategies for success, interviews with real estate rock stars, and we will dig deep into past projects where we bear it all, including the good, the bad, and some just plain ugly. So get excited. Here's the bestower of badassery herself, the real Jen Josie. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm Jen Josie, creator of RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network. Whoop, whoop. On today's episode, we have a guest that will be sharing their badassery. But before we begin, here's today's badassery bestowment, a little badass gift to you. Today's topic is the importance of using a detailed lease. As a new landlord, one of the most crucial tools in your toolkit is a detailed lease agreement. A thorough lease doesn't just protect your property, it sets clear expectations for both you and your tenants, reducing the likelihood of misunderstandings and disputes. Here are 6 reasons why having a detailed lease is essential. Number 1, clearly define responsibilities. A detailed lease outlines the rights and responsibilities of both the landlord and the tenant. This includes everything from who is responsible for minor repairs to how utilities are managed. Clear terms prevent confusion and ensure everyone knows what is expected. Number 2, protect your property. Your lease can specify how the property should be cared for, restrictions on alterations, and rules regarding pets or smoking. This safeguards your investment and helps ensure your property is returned in good condition. Number 3, establish payment terms and consequences. A strong lease explicitly states the rent amount, due date, payment methods, and late fees. It can also include policies for bounced checks or partial payments. Having these details in writing helps avoid awkward conversations and ensures you're paid on time. Number 4, provide legal protection. A well-crafted lease serves as a legally binding document in case of disputes. If a tenant violates the agreement, such as subletting without permission or failing to pay rent, the lease becomes your primary evidence in legal proceedings. Number 5, prevent misunderstandings. Common issues like parking, noise levels, and the use of shared spaces can lead to conflict if not addressed up front. A detailed lease leaves no room for ambiguity, fostering a smoother landlord-tenant relationship. Number 6, cover unforeseen scenarios. Leases should also account for potential situations like early lease termination, guest policies, or property maintenance during emergencies. Addressing these scenarios up front reduces stress for both parties. So, a detailed lease agreement is a landlord's best friend. It protects your property, ensures legal compliance, and creates a foundation of trust and clarity with your tenants. While it may take a little time to draft, it's a worthwhile investment that can save you countless headaches down the line. If you're unsure of where to start, consult with an experienced property attorney or use a state-specific lease template to ensure your agreement covers all the essentials. A little effort now can lead to smooth sailing for your rental business. Now on to today's episode of the Real Estate Investor Growth Network podcast. We have with us Bob Brown, the founder of Arizona Foundation Solutions. Over his 35-year career, Bob built one of the only foundation repair companies that leverage licensed professional engineers from the start, ensuring precise analysis and recommendations before presenting solutions to homeowners. He's the mastermind behind 4 patented innovations, with 3 more pending, and developed a cloud-based software software to streamline foundation investigations. Bob is also the author of Which Way Is My Foundation Moving? And the upcoming Foundation Repair Secrets. If you're tired of confusing advice or misleading claims in the world of foundation repair, Bob is here to deliver the real truth with a blend of engineering expertise and construction practicality. It's my pleasure to have him on the show, so welcome, Bob Brown. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I am so excited to have you on here because foundations can make or break your project. So there are so many important topics that we are going to hit today, and hopefully we can get to all of them. But let's start with you, Bob. How did you get started in this very niche but super important world of foundations?
Well, I graduated from Arizona State University in architecture and in finance. And I kind of worked my way through college doing concrete repairs and just sort of leveraged concrete repair eventually into foundation repair. So here I am.
Nice, simple, and easy. I love it. So you work mostly, I'm assuming, with homeowners, but we are going to make sure that our listeners who are real estate investors, how they need people like you in their life to make sure that they are setting a solid foundation for their flip. So what are some of the biggest misconceptions real estate investors have about foundation issues when evaluating a property? That's a loaded question.
Yeah, there's only about 1 million, but I mean, let's start with first, what do you look for, right? That's the easiest, most direct thing to talk about first. And it's the basic things. You want to have a pattern, okay? You'll have cracks in your walls, cracks in your floors, sloping floors, doors and windows out of square. Any one of those things, maybe a crack or something, unless it's really super wide, wider than you can fit a pencil in. Otherwise, have a pattern, a grouping of these things. And that's when you start to look at, okay, I've got a pattern, I've got a grouping of these things. I need to get some advice. I need to get some help. So then the question is, what do you do? Who do you call? And that's where the mistakes start to happen. Most people dial up, they Google, and they dial up a foundation repair company. And the reason I know that is because I had a foundation repair company, and I also had a forensic engineering company.
Wow.
And so I speak from a position of knowledge of how the industry operates and how it shouldn't operate. And the fact of the matter is, when you call a foundation repair company, who are they going to send out? They're going to send out a 100% commissioned salesperson. And their job is to basically sell work. And they will interpret anything as a need to sell or purchase work. And these guys are not engineers. They get their knowledge from a few days seminar put on by their supplier. That's about it.
Wow.
And the fact of the matter is, they're not experts, even though they will tell you that they are, because they're very assertive and they puff up their chest and tell you that they're great and all this stuff. They don't have the qualifications of an engineer, especially a forensic engineer that specializes in this kind of work. And so it's easy to find these foundation repair companies, but it's a mistake. What you need to do is roll up your sleeves and find a good geotechnical forensic engineer. And they will be the ones that will guide you without an agenda to what really needs to happen.
All right. So what are some sure sign things that we need to call in the experts here? So I was always told that horizontal cracks in, say, a brick foundation is a lot worse than stair-step cracks. That a stair-step crack, if it's on the edge of a house, is a lot easier to fix. I have been told water penetration is a really scary thing if you open up the crawl space door and you get a waft of misty smelling and you see standing water in there. And then the sloping of the floors, that one is a huge one for me too, because I always feel like I can fix that like sistering a joist or something, but that could really be some settling of the foundation, etc. So what are some things that newer real estate investors really need to be aware of when they are evaluating properties?
Well, okay, so you mentioned a bunch of things, and a lot of them, some of them could be related, but a lot of them may not be related.
Okay.
So let's talk about cracks. Maybe a horizontal crack is worse than a stair step crack. I don't know. I'm not really sure about that. It possibly could. Water, I mean, water comes in foundations all the time, especially if you have a basement. It comes in the basements regardless of whether you have foundation problems or not. And if you have a crawl space and it's full of water, well, you need to encapsulate it and put a dehumidifier and a sump pump and all that in there to drain it out and seal off the vents. That's kind of the newer train of thinking as opposed to venting it, right? Which is a big mistake. So some of those things are not really related. Some of them could be related. But the fact of the matter is, you want to look at these groupings and patterns that we talked about earlier. And if you see a horizontal crack in the brick next to a sloped floor, next to
what about like doorways? I've seen cracks
right.
going out the tops of like the top corners of doorways.
Yeah, and you'll see that, and you'll see pinched doors. What I mean by pinched door is if you look at a door, on one side, maybe it's got an inch gap, and the other side, it's pinched. That indicates that one side's going up and the other side's going down. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean settlement. It just means one side might be going up and the other side might be going down. What do I mean by that? That's kind of vague. But what I mean is a lot of people think that foundation movement automatically means settlement. And that's another myth. A lot of foundation movement is expansive clay heave, where the clays get wet and they expand upward and push up in some parts of the house, or maybe a lot of it. And it can be just as destructive as settlement. As a matter of fact, maybe even more destructive. So you want to be careful about how you label this stuff. Not everything is settlement. I call it movement because until you actually figure out which way it's moving, the best way to think about it is just call it movement.
Got it. And fixes for these types of movements that we have. When I'm evaluating a property and there's really wavy floors and I see cracks in doorway, things like that, I'm throwing 10 grand at it just to put it in my budget. What are some typical fixes for typical settling or movement of the ground, as you call it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's heave, it's a totally different fix. So you have to figure out what's going on first. And most everybody thinks about settlement because that's probably, depending on the area that you're in, the more predominant. But and settlement is usually repaired with piling products, helical piles, push piles, those kinds of products. And those are good products. They're installed well by installers, and they generally perform long-term very well. The question is it the right fix? And the fact of the matter is that a lot of times you may have the movement may be all done moving. You may be underpinning the wrong side of the house. You might be putting in too few or too many. The problem is not the products. The problem is the design of the products. Who is designing it? Is it some guy that was selling cars 3 weeks before? Or is it a licensed professional engineer?
I have an engineer that loves a helical pier, and we have 4 of them in this house. It was because the weight of a very old chimney. Oh, yeah. And so we had to add 4 helical piers there, and those were like $2,500 a pop. So, yep, that sounds about right. So let's kind of shift here and let's go into soil and how does soil behavior affect foundation stability?
Right. Okay, so a lot of people think that soil is really simple, but in fact, it's not. It's very complex. It's not just some brown mass below the surface. It's many layers, and it's deposited in layers, and each layer is a different mineral content and a different density and a different affinity to water. And the layers are not exactly even. They slant, they disappear, they come back, they have rocks in there, and you could have several different things going on at different layers because the water travels between the layers. And so the fact of the matter is you could have lots of things going on all at the same time. And if anyone tries to tell you, oh yeah, this house is done moving, or no, it's not done moving, it's going to move more, unless they're a geotechnical engineer, they're really BSing you because they don't know.
Good to know. And we have an older neighborhood across, I'm also in a historic neighborhood, but they're getting sinkholes, random sinkholes going on. That's got to be a soil issue. That's crazy to me. That freaks me out.
So a sinkhole is basically where you have limestone deposits underground and water leaks through and starts creating a cavern as it leaks. And the cavern gets higher and higher and higher, closer to the surface. And eventually it gets so close that it's thin and weak and unable to support the load, and whoosh, down it goes.
That is so scary. And can you even determine if there's a possibility of sinkholes in an area? Because I know Florida's got them all over the place. So okay.
Oh, sure. Yeah. That's another reason why you want to talk to a geotechnical engineer. They're familiar with it. And by the way, that's probably the right guy to call as opposed to a structural engineer. We can talk about that. But geotech, most of these foundation problems are a result of soil. And so that's where the action is. That's where that's the guys you want to talk to. And they know how the soil is deposited over time. They know the history of an area. They drill in it all the time. They know the layering. They know what's going on. They would know about the possibility of what they call karst, which is limestone caverns.
Okay, good. Very good to know. And soil, I'm in North Carolina. We're very clay based.
Right.
And then was born in Florida, where it's very sandy in certain areas. And so I do know it changes from place to place, and super important to have one of those experts on your team. So let's get into these licensed people that you want to make sure you are working with. So why is it essential to involve, say, licensed engineers when assessing foundation issues? And we are going to drive this home, Bob, because I work with students all over the country, and it's an expense that even when it's before you even close on the property, it is so worth hiring a licensed engineer or a licensed, tell me one more time what the soil person is. The
geotechnical
engineer. And it's so important to have those. So really drive this home, Bob.
Sure. Well, let's think of it this way. If you were really sick, you have a choice. You could go to and pay good money to go to a doctor, or you could go for free to a pharmaceutical rep. What do you think your choice would be? Okay. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. It's very similar. Okay.
And give us a price estimate of what I know it varies all over the place. There's a loaded question, but you should be expected to spend around how much?
Well, okay. Most engineers are going to charge around $3,000, so it's a little expensive. I'm in the process of developing software for engineers and training home inspectors to gather the data that the engineers can use. If that's the case, the price comes way down. And so we're in the process of trying to kind of affect this change throughout the industry, make a change in the industry. And if that's the case, the price could come down to closer to $900.
Nice.
Which is a little easier to swallow when you compare it to free, right?
Absolutely.
Of course, free, you're not going to get an analysis. You're going to get a sales pitch that's dressed up to look like analysis. That's what you're going to get.
And there is one property we had to get an environmental engineer because of things that were buried under the ground. We have in North Carolina, we have a lot of buried oil tanks, and how to remove them properly. And I just cannot enforce this enough that it is so worth the money, because spending $9,000 to $3,000, I've never paid $3,000 by the way, but that, I guess we have a really, I love my engineer that we use all the time, and he's been on the show. So it's so important to spend that money now, because if you are in negotiations and you're buying a $500,000 property that when you renovate, it could be worth $1 million or whatever. But if that is going to be the difference of a huge, like if you can say, here is proof from an engineer who says this is what the issue is, we need to renegotiate the price down or we're walking away from this deal, and you're going to lose that money for that inspection. But then a lot of times they're going to have to disclose that.
They'll have to disclose it anyway. Although as a listing agent, There's a strategy of how to lose your job, and I'll tell you how it is.
Well, that's
So,
in certain states, and not all states do you have to disclose
right.
previous inspections that were done, just so you know. But that's,
Could very well could be. So
yeah.
here's what happens in Arizona. The listing agent, the inspector brings all the problems to light during the inspection window, and then the buyer heads for the hills, and the seller fires the listing agent, and then fixes up, patches all the problems, hides them, and hires a new listing agent. And that's not a great strategy if you're a listing agent, right? It's how to lose your job. So a better strategy is to hire either a good home inspector that knows how to conduct a floor elevation survey, or if you see all these problems, hire a good forensic engineer and either get a clean bill of health. Hey, you got some problems, but it's all done moving, or it's not serious, or it's not a big deal, or let's monitor it in 6 months, whatever, fix your drainage, something easy, right? And then you get that seal of approval. Now that's really important, because that's your get out of jail free card. And you get into an escrow, and a home inspector says, then you just present this thing and say, here you go, we're good to go. Now, if the engineer says, well, you're going to probably see continued movement, you probably need to put some piers in, you need to fix it. Okay, well, here's a good plan. Now the engineer comes up with a plan. He draws the drawing and says, put 7 piers right here. Now, you don't have the problem that everybody else does, where you hire company A to come out and they go, well, you need 15 piers on this side. Company B says, no, you need 17 on this side. Company C says, no, you need 25 all the way around. And you're like, how do you know which one's right? You're not the expert, right? So the engineer solves that problem for you. And you tell the contractors, bid this only. Don't give me your opinion. I don't care about your opinion. Bid this. And guess what? They're going to have to sharpen their pencils, because they know they're bidding apples to apples now. And you're going to save all that money, and plus more probably, because of the fact that they're sharpening their pencils. And you might not be having to go with 25 piers when you only needed 7, right? So you're going to save a ton of money in the end by doing it right. And you're going to have a lot better strategy going into this thing in the end.
Bob, that is excellent advice, and have them to just bid on what you are telling them to do instead of adding their own opinion. So thank you for that. Let's go back into this software that you have developed, because I love this. What inspired you to develop and patent these new solutions for foundation repair, which is very needed?
Well, I've always been thinking about, okay, we're running a business, right into a problem. Well, how do we solve this problem? Well, we come up with this, we come up with that, we come up with ideas. We don't just like keep banging our head on the wall and hope for a better solution, right? And I've been doing that all my life. I'm a thinker. I try to come up with ways to solve problems. And as I mentioned, we had a forensic engineering company, and there is no framework out there to do these investigations up front. Although I will tell you, I don't know if you're aware of it, North Carolina is unique, because the Board of Technical Registration, they call it Board of Engineers and Surveyors or something like that, requires, theoretically, that before a plan can be presented to a homeowner, it has to be reviewed by an engineer. Now,
that's true. Yep.
There is not a lot of compliance. There is some compliance, but not 100% compliance around that. And we're trying to work with the board and help them improve this, because we think it should be a model for the rest of the nation.
Nice.
So the fact of the matter is, you want to get your arms around all of this up front. And so we developed a solution, software. We started, with the software. Originally, we just kind of did Microsoft Publisher and grabbed this and grabbed that and Frankensteined it all together. And they were like, no, I think we could do a little better. Let's think about this. And so over 8 years, we improved it and improved it. And when I sold the company 2 years ago, I kept all the intellectual property.
Good for you.
So now we have this software, and we've been using it for a lot of years, and we've made a lot of improvements to it. And the idea with it is to be able to allow a certified inspector, such as a home inspector or somebody who works for the engineer, to be able to go on the site, gather all the data, and present it to the engineer without the engineer having to go on the property. Now that's huge because almost
Huge.
always the engineers want to go on the property. And then that makes it very expensive. So what we're trying to do is gather that data in a way that the engineer can have confidence in, that he can put his seal on, knowing that nothing's been missed and that all the relevant data is there. Now that's a big hurdle, but we've managed it for a lot of years, and we vetted it. And so now we want to present that to the community to be able to make it more efficient so that these things can take place at a little better price point.
That is so needed in this industry. And yes, I just paid my engineer to come out because we failed a framing inspection. And so we've had to dish out some cash because he had to come out on site and write up reports and do things like that. So yes, it is very expensive. So thank you, Bob, for all of that initiative to do that. And speaking of technology, so I'm sure in your 35 years experience, technologies have changed a lot over time. And before we hit record for this podcast, we were talking a little bit about that foam stuff that they inject in, say, like a driveway. And that's such cool technology, in my opinion. What have you seen over the years some things that just, has anything really blown your mind that they have invented in your 35 years?
Well, there's been a lot of really cool stuff. I mean, when I first started, we were injecting grout in the soil and using pressurized grout to stabilize the soil and raise. And we eventually moved over to the polyurethane foam, just for mud jacking only, not for soil stabilization. But I'm not a big believer in it for that, and I'll probably spend a whole show talking about that. But for mud jacking or for lifting and releveling a driveway, the foams work great. We used it a lot. It's pretty simple. You just drill your holes, you inject it, you kind of listen, you feel it, and sometimes it travels, and you have to be careful. But it's a bit of an art as much as a science, and a good technician installing it does a good job with it, and make sure that the right portions get lifted. It's a great product. Yeah, I've got a product that I'm in the middle of developing right now. I've got a patent pending on it where it raises up a concrete floor with just an 1.5 inch diameter hole.
Wow.
As a piling product, not as a foam product, as a pier that goes down on the ground. Because think about it. I mean, if you've got a slab on grade and you've got expansive clay soil underneath it and you're maybe low in the middle, well, you inject a bunch of foam in there, and now those clays somehow get wet later on. Guess what? You have an explosive problem. And so you want to avoid that. So what you can do instead of putting foam in it is you can put a pier in it and raise it up and leave a gap. And then if those expansive soils ever get wet, they just close the gap.
Wow. And we had a property that was probably about 100 years old that we were renovating, and the basement walls were bowing in.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so they did these, I don't even know what they were, just big metal bars, I guess.
Yeah, right. Yep, I'm familiar with it.
But then I live down the street from the governor's mansion here in North Carolina, and they just they had bowing walls in the basement, but they dug out the foundation all around. And I was chatting with the landscaper who's like, they took up all my beautiful plants around the house. But that's how they had to fix it. So what other technologies, any things over the years, how things have changed or?
Well, I mean, one of the kind of the cooler technologies that's out there is this carbon fiber fabrics. And carbon fiber is about 10 times stronger than steel for the weight. And so a lot of times, instead of having to put steel on those walls, they can put a carbon fiber fabric on them, and considerably cheaper and easier. Now, it has its place. It's not perfect for everything, but I think for the most part, in a lot of situations, it's a good fix.
Nice. I love hearing stuff like this. All right. So Bob, you've been in this industry for 35 years, as I've said a few times here. And do you have any memorable stories or lessons that in foundation repair that you have learned over the years?
Well, I'll tell you about one really interesting, cool project. Towards the end of my career, we had a 300,000 square foot tilt-up building. Now, a tilt-up building is those big industrial buildings where they pour the concrete flat and then crank it up to go all the way around. 40 foot tall, 12 inch thick concrete slab. And this building was built on top of a landfill, and it settled 15.5 inches and was settling at about a half inch a month when we came across it. It was very super scary, super wide cracks between the panels, a lot of crazy movement going on. And we ended up spending 3 years working on this project for $6 million.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
I often tell people it was the $6 million project.
So the $6 million man. Wow.
Austin.
That is crazy. And it also, when you were talking about this, it made me think, I mean, it was in the news years ago, but Stoneman Douglas High School in South Florida, where there was a shooting on Valentine's Day, but it's named after Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, who was an environmentalist. And they built the school in the Everglades, and it is actually sinking like an inch a year or something crazy like that. I have no idea what they're doing to fix that, but I know I actually had the pleasure of interviewing Marjorie Stoneman Douglas when I was in 7th grade, and I know she would be just turning in her grave knowing that they built this school in the Everglades and it's sinking and doing that. So for a situation like that, what is a fix for that? And this is a huge school.
Yeah, it depends what kind of a structure it is. There's lots of types of footings and structures and so forth. So you have to kind of think that through a little bit. But most of the piling products are going to work. The problem is they don't really work all that great on floors, as we talked about earlier. So it becomes a little bit more difficult. Sometimes maybe you can inject high pressure grout underneath the whole area, and that firms up all those soils and makes them nice and hard. And that covers an area of slab as well as the footing. And so that might be a more economical approach. There could be anywhere 3 and 10 different approaches for a school like that, depending on a lot of factors.
Let's just hope it's not another $6 million project. So
probably going to be more than that.
Oh, goodness. All right. So I want to get into, before we go into the second part of the podcast here, we have on the screen, it says RK Bob Brown. And I get this because my name is Jen Josie, which is not a very popular name, but I had to come up with the website, The Real Jen Josie, because Jen Josie was already taken. And your publicist said, put the RK in front there so that you are easily searchable on the internet. Right. So I do. What does RK stand for?
Well, it's my first 2 names, Robert Kimball.
Got it. Very good. So I want to get into your book, The Foundation Repair Secret. So what can the readers expect to learn from it?
Well, there's a bunch of really cool things. I mean, first of all, it goes through some of the things we talked about with soil. It talks about the different types of foundations. It talks about what foundations, how they're typically fixed. It goes through the difference of how to recognize what's going on. And there's like 17 things that need to be gathered up before you can really figure it out. And then what do you do for it? What do you do for heave? What do you do for settlement? And basically it kind of arms the homeowner with at least enough knowledge to defend themselves and be careful. Now in it, I talk about it, and maybe I don't drive it home as well as I should, but they should be talking to engineers. I had 20 salesmen working for me, foundation repair salesmen, so I know all about them. They have their use. They shouldn't be diagnosing things. That's not their strong point, right?
Right.
And these guys in the industry, all of them, get paid pretty well. They make somewhere between $100,000 and $300,000 a year, which is not bad. And if they don't make at least $100,000 a year, they're usually kicked to the curb. Yeah. So there's a lot of pressure to perform. So in it, I talk about all these things. I talk about the difference between a salesman and an engineer, and I go through how to understand these things and take care of yourself and not be taken advantage of. Because frankly, the foundation repair is a $55 billion market, and I would say at least half of it is put in on things that they don't need to be done.
Well, I think that's super important for the homeowner and for real estate investors, because we have to prepare ourselves to be taken by one of these people who are just trying to earn some money here. So we have 2 links that you are sharing with the listeners, because we are getting into the second part of the podcast here, but we have not even touched on so many important topics in foundations. So you are kind enough to share two, I'm going to call them giveaways. So what should the listeners look for in the show notes of this podcast?
So really, basically, you just want to look up my website, foundationrepairsecrets.com. And in it, you can find a link to my book. You can sign up for my newsletter. And if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll get these 2 docs. And the 2 docs are the 15 myths of foundation repair as they relate to real estate, and the 10 most common problems that real estate professionals make when it comes to foundations. And there's no way we're going to go through all of that today. It'd be like trying to drink from a fire hose. But let me just give you one little fortissimo, okay? So every foundation repair company out there offers these lifetime warranties, right? And so people think, oh, well, I'm groovy, I'm covered, I'm a lifetime warranty. Now, that don't mean nothing. I'm sorry, it don't mean nothing. I mean, there are so many get out of jail free cards. Let me tell you what happens. 5 years later, after the foundation's done, the homeowner calls up the foundation repair company and says, I got a lot more cracks. Come back out, honor your warranty. So the foundation repair company sends out a really experienced guy, and he says, oh, well, this is from expansive soil heave. And it says right here in our contract, peers can't stop expansive soil heave. So have a nice life. Wow. And then so the homeowner says, wait. If it's expansive soil heave, doesn't that mean that you diagnosed it wrong? And the contractor says, well, what do we know? We're just dumb contractors. We're not engineers. And the fact of the matter is there's this, what I call the design donut hole. So the registrar of contractors in each state only enforce workmanship. They don't enforce designs from contractors.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And guess what? The engineering boards, they have no jurisdiction over contractors. So there's this big donut hole of non-responsibility that is out there. And what you want instead of a lifetime warranty is an engineer's seal. And let me explain that. So let's suppose that you hire an engineer and he says, put in these 12 piers right here, and you go bid it out, and the contractor puts it in. And especially this happens a lot when they discover a problem in escrow and they go, okay, well, we're going to set aside $35,000. And because we can't get it done during escrow, you got to go pull permits and everything. It takes 6 months, blah, 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 blah. So we'll just set this money aside. And then after escrow and everybody moves in, everybody's happy, we'll schedule the work and get it done. Well, great, except here's what happens about half the time. You get into the project and the contractor says, oh yeah, we need to add 5 more piers. Oh, well, who's going to pay for that? The seller's long gone. Now what? We're going to go chase him down and try to make him pay? Good luck with that. So here's a better plan. Instead of the homeowner managing the project, have the engineer manage the project. Now, if the contractor says to the engineer, hey, we need to add piers, the engineer's going to say, okay, hog breath, explain it to me. But you're going to be a lot more careful about it because you're talking to somebody who knows what they're doing, right? And so it's not likely to happen, for one thing. But for another thing, you want the engineer watching over the project. A lot of times states and city inspectors, they don't really understand this business because it's kind of complex. And so then they say, well, we want a special inspector instead. Now, a special inspector is a licensed professional engineer who goes out and checks everything and makes sure that it's good and then signs off on it for the city inspector's place. The problem is that it's so lax that they just tell the contractor, well, just everybody in the industry, just go get a special inspector. Well, now the special inspector is working for the contractor. That's not a good plan, because you think he's going to push back if the inspector's screwing up a little bit? No, he's not going to do that. He's going to lose his contract in the future. He gets all these special inspections from this guy. He's not going to screw that up. Well, it's better to have the designer who designed it be in charge, select the contractor, and be the special inspector. And when he's all done, he's going to put his seal on it saying, hey, this was done right. And if the inspector, if the contractor's not going to do it right, then he's not going to sign off on it. And that contractor's not going to get paid. That's the way to control a project to make sure it gets done right.
So well said. And like I said, we are knee deep in this right now because our contractor, we had to bring our engineer back to go back over and check some of the stuff that failed on this framing. And it had to do with LVLs, and they were cut when they shouldn't have been. Oh, the joys of construction. So, well, Bob, this has been amazing. And again, tell us one more time the website so that they can sign up for your newsletter to get these 2 docs.
Right. It's called Foundation Repair Secrets. And by the way, on that website, there's a section called Directory. And you can find for every state engineers. Now, I heard you say you've got some engineers you'd like, and offline, I would love to get their names because
absolutely,
if they're good at this, I want to include them in my directory. I don't charge anything for engineers to be in my directory. I'm just putting it out there because I want people to be able to find good help. I got enough money when I sold my company. I don't have to kill the world anymore. I'm just trying to make it a little better place.
I love that. And I appreciate you doing that. So, well, we are going to move to the second part of the podcast here, which is what makes RK Bob Brown, if you're going to search for him. What makes Bob a badass? And I use the acronym BADASS. And the first letter is B for book. What is a book you have read that made a huge difference in your life?
Oh, I love all of Peter Diamandis' book. Peter Diamandis is named by Forbes one of the world's 50 greatest leaders. And he's got 3 books. Let me think if I can. The Future is Faster Than You Think, Abundance, and the third one is, you think I would know it. I refer to them all the time. They're great books. And the reason they're great is because Peter's got a lot of really interesting rules. And one of them is the opposite of Murphy's Law. If something possibly goes wrong, to hell with it. Make your own rules and fix it. And to hell with Murphy is what he says. And it's just kind of it's the kind of thinking he has where, hey, if you see a lot of problems, that's an opportunity to make a difference in the world, and go do it. And maybe if you do it right, the world will reward you, right? And that's the way he thinks about things. And the future is not this dark, dreary place. It's a place of abundance. It's a place of great opportunity. And Peter just really helped me see that.
I love that. Screw Murphy and his laws. So I love that. All right. The first A in badass is for advice. You've given us excellent advice. And I'm just curious, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Well, back when I was in college, when they rode dinosaurs to school.
Uphill both ways.
Yeah. I had a professor by the name of Professor Wilk. And he was a really awesome guy. And he gave me a piece of advice that I always lived with all my life. And I still remember it. And it all has to do with risk. And he said, everybody has to decide whether they're going to eat better or whether they're going to sleep better, because you can't have it both ways. And you really kind of have to think about all of your decisions in life and how they relate to risk and how much tolerance you have or don't have to things that you want to do.
Excellent advice. I can remember when I was in college, I was a music education major, and we had to take a course about teaching the World Wide Web in our classrooms. And I'm like, who's going to use this stupid garbage? And so yes, I too rode a dinosaur to college. So, all right. The D in badass is for drive. What drives you to be successful?
Oh, I think ultimately, I just want to make the world a better place. I see the problems that are out there. I see people getting to take advantage of, and I've got tons of stories of examples of people who've just been like totally devastated by these problems and have been taken advantage of by people. And I just want to change that. I want to make it so that that doesn't happen anymore.
Well, I appreciate that and all your innovations and your books. And so thank you for that. All right. The second A in badass is for aspiration. I'm a big goal setter. So what is a goal you are currently working on?
Well, my big, hairy, audacious goal.
BHAG. I love them. Yes.
Yeah. is to create a new industry, to actually, it's I don't know any other way to say it, but I just want to create a new industry where the foundation repair diagnosis happens differently than it does now.
And I believe you will do that. Absolutely. All right. The first S in badass is for systems. I'm sure you're a systems guy, clearly with all your innovations, but what systems help you achieve success?
Well, I'm a little bit ADD. And I'm always, mind is chasing after squirrels and shiny objects and things. And one of the tools that I love is a little notebook called a Remarkable Pad.
Oh.
And you can write on it, you can transfer it to your computer. And you can have a little template that has like the day, each day of the week or each day. Yeah, got a calendar in it. And it really helps me keep track of everything and keep me on course. And that's probably a system and a tool that's been the most beneficial for me.
I bought one of those for my husband because he is a general contractor. We own a construction company, and that has been a huge lifesaver. Thanks for bringing that one up. I love that one. So I could talk to you all day, Bob, but we are going to wrap this up with the final S in badass, which is success. What does success mean to Bob Brown, aka RK Bob Brown?
I guess success means that I've made a difference in the world and I made it a better place. That's ultimately, I mean, you could go into a lot of flowery things. I don't need to have fancy things and yachts and all that kind of stuff, but I just want to see some changes, and success means that I've made a difference. That's what I want to see.
Well, I appreciate that so much, and I know you are making a huge difference to so many. So, Bob, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, great to be here.
Absolutely. And that is all. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode. Now, go out there and share your badassery. And don't forget, make it a great day. Take care. Bye-bye. Whoop, whoop.
Thank you for listening to RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. If you need more badassery, you can follow Jen Josie by visiting therealjenjosie.com or become a member of RAIN by registering on rainmastermind.com.